Hello, and welcome back to Indie Rebel, the podcast for independent filmmakers. My name is Christopher Temple, and today we're going to talk about how do you pay for your movie. This is all about the budget. I'm going to come right out and say that budgeting is by far my least favorite part of the production process. I do not like it. Well, I might like the initial budget where you're kind of going in the ideal phase, and we'll talk about that in a bit of like, oh, how much would it cost to make the film? And you get your delusions of grandeur going and all that kind of stuff. But as far as actually like dealing with the money and finding the money and just that whole side of things is by far my least favorite part of this process. Fair warning, you are going to need software to pull this off. You can, I guess, for like a small movie or a short film, do this all by hand on paper, but you will find it infinitely easier if you use a spreadsheet. And spreadsheets today don't have to cost anything. You don't have to buy Microsoft Office. If you're on a Mac, you have access to Numbers. You've got Google Sheets. There's LibreOffice as well, which has a calc program, which is also a spreadsheet. So there are a lot of free options out there. And as a side effect of using, a actual spreadsheet program, you're going to learn really quickly how to actually use spreadsheet software because I don't feel like it's something that's taught enough in schools. I know I was never taught it. We learned how to type and had a basic, I think, intro to like PowerPoint at one point, but that was it. Everything else we were expected to know on our own. And so I never learned how to use a spreadsheet until I started trying to budget my feature films. I never did this kind of work on a short film because short films, they're kind of just gimmies and freebies and, for lack of a better term, they're kind of throwaways. Now, there are people out there getting their panties in a bunch right now because they're like, well, I spent $20,000 on my short film. Okay, great. You're trying to make a short film the studio way. That's a different scenario. I'm talking about the indie rebel, the person that is working a 9 to 5 somewhere else. They're strapped for cash. You're not going to need to do a full budgeting thing for your own short film because I can almost guarantee, if you've followed the advice in previous episodes, you've written a film that you know you can make with the things that you already have and the means that you already have. So you're not getting super crazy with it. So back to the spreadsheets here for a second. Every time I start a new movie, when I'm in the middle of the script phase, I create a new spreadsheet document. And that document consists of a bunch of different subsheets within it. And I'm actually going to open mine up here and we'll go through the ones that I've got. Spreadsheet number 1 is miscellaneous notes and ideas. And so if I've got a to-do list of like, hey, I need to contact this location or try to find this actor or whatever, I've got just kind of a to-do list in there with a due date, next to it. My next one is a production report. And again, this is all in the same document. I open up one file and I have access to all these things because I've got different sheets set up in my spreadsheet. The production report is not something, again, that the indie rebel really needs to worry about unless you've got a lot of outside financing and producers. But it is something you will probably have to worry about eventually. And so I find it's a good habit to get into now. It's basically just a way of recording what went down that day on set. Who was there? When did they arrive? When did they leave? Did they get a lunch? What scenes did we shoot? How many pages of script? What cameras did we use? How much footage did we shoot with each camera? What's our total count for the entire production? Like, how much footage have we shot for the entire thing? And so these production reports are great. I can just print one out each day. I fill it in as people show up and as they leave, and I'm good to go. The next ones are where we really begin to get into the budgeting phase, and that is the top sheet and the budget itself. The top sheet is linked to the budget page. And the top sheet is just my different accounts, my main categories. I've got script and story, talent, which is cast and creative team. So your actors, you yourself as a director, the producers, that kind of a thing. Production personnel. So if you've hired grips and makeup and stuff like that, that's where they would be listed. Location expenses, okay? Motels, meals, food and transpo, all that kind of stuff. Field equipment, if you're renting or buying anything, what's your total cost for that? Sound and music, same thing. And then finally, editing and finishing. And then there's a total section down at the bottom. So that's my top sheet. I can If I'm, trying to talk money with somebody, they can look at this and be like, oh, yeah, this is basically what he needs. If they want the more detailed version, then we jump over to the budget itself. And again, these values are linked into the top sheet. So I've got those same categories, but now it's all broken down. Like when I'm looking at the talent section, there's the director, there's executive producer, there's my cast. And all this is broken down into columns that have things like quantity, units, fee, cost, and total. So the quantity is how much of each unit I need. Units can be a flat rate, they can be a day rate, it doesn't matter. I just specify what that unit is in that column. Then the fee, well, what is that day rate? What does that cost me? And then the cost itself is tallied automatically by multiplying your quantity by your fee. And then all that gets added up and spit into the total section on there. So this budget is one that I actually downloaded, probably almost 20 years ago when I was doing my very first feature. And I'm trying to do things the right way and have a budget and all this kind of stuff. And I've just modified it and used the same one over the years. I created my own top sheet for it, and it seems to work out pretty well. Also, side note, if you buy my book, Indie Rebel, a masterclass in independent filmmaking, there's a link in the budget chapter where you can go and download this same project file yourself. And so you'll have all the stuff already filled out, as well as the visual effects list. And that is extremely helpful when you're in post production because that is included in this project file. So the visual effects list is basically shot numbers, time code, a description of the shot. I've programmed the box to have a status. Do I need to fix it? Is it okay to screen as is? Whatever. How long the shot is in frames, and then what lens I'm using on it. And so when I get my rough cut done, I will go through the entire movie and spend a day just filling out the VFX list. I also have a list of all my cast and crew, so when credits come around, that's easy to do, as well as a special thanks section. Special thanks is hugely important because, guys, it doesn't cost you anything extra to credit someone for working on your film. Okay? You spend 5 seconds typing their name in and you probably don't even think about it again. But to that person that worked on your project, seeing their name on the big screen, even if it's just in the special thanks, is huge and it means a lot to them and it goes a long way to making things happen. So, what I do is if I'm doing like a day where what we call extras day, where I have a bunch of extra people showing up, I have a sign in sheet that doubles as a release form. It just says, hey, I agree to be filmed. Here's my name and here's how I want it to be in the credits. And then I will take that and then I add that to this list. And so when I'm done with my movie, anybody that helped me out in any way, shape, or form, their name is on this list, and it's easy for me to print it out and then type it into Cinecred, which is what I use for making my credits. And we'll talk about that probably in the video the episode where we talk about editing. So, a lot involved with that, but it is super, super handy and super helpful. And it's worked fine for me for, 4 feature length films. Well, technically 5, but we'll say 4. If you have the money for it, Movie Magic Budgeting is a great tool to buy, but it costs a couple $100. But that's all it is. It's a glorified spreadsheet. It's got your top sheet with your different accounts, and then you go in and you got the list for everything, and it's all the same thing. So I don't think that it's absolutely necessary to spend that kind of money, especially at the indie film level. I would rather, if I was going to buy a piece of software, I would rather buy the scheduling program than the budgeting program. Now, that's just me personally, but that's the way I feel about it. Now, when it comes time to making your budget, there are really 2 ways you can go about it and 2 ways you can look at it. One is how much money will it cost me to do? And this is why I'm a huge advocate for make your make your schedule first, do your breakdowns, figure out what you need and how long you need them for, because then you're just plugging in numbers here. All you have to do is start calling up crew members and actors, being like, what's your day rate? And then you fill that into the budget and you're good. And now you've got what I call the ideal budget. How much money will it cost? If money was no issue, which is funny because we're talking about money, this is what I can make my movie for. And you're going to take into account paying yourself for writing and directing and producing and editing. And if you're running camera, same thing. Or hiring people to do some of these roles for you. Hiring your cast. any locations you need to rent, any special props, how much is makeup going to cost, all that kind of stuff. Visual effects, right? Let's not forget about that one. So you're going to create your ideal budget. That's the how much money will it cost phase. The flip side of that is how much money do I have? And this is where you sit there and say, okay, I've got $2,000 to try to figure this thing out. Well, I don't have a camera, I don't have a computer. I'm probably going to spend $1,000 right there off the bat trying to make this thing happen. Because I can buy a refurbished MacBook Pro on backmarket.com, not black market, back market. And then I can get a used camera off of eBay. By the time I throw in a memory card, some batteries, a couple cheap lights, some sound gear, now I'm eating into that budget anymore or more. Maybe now I only have $500 left of my $2,000 budget. That $500 you're gonna have to use to win over actors with gas and food, and you're probably gonna have to do a lot of sweet talking to people and social engineering as well. Talk about social engineering here in just a second. I got a little story about that. So, I usually will try my ideal budget first, just so I know, like, okay, what kind of movie am I trying to make here in a best case scenario? And then I start paring it back and paring it back. And eventually I end up into the how much money do I have scenario, and I try to fill it in from there. I want to tell you a little story here, real quick. I call this delusions of grandeur. When I shot Leap Rise of the Beast in 2010, I had a producer initially that was going to help me with the project. And so we sat down one night and we ran the numbers and we said, okay, if money was not an issue and we knew that we could get the money, how much would this movie cost us? And we came up with a budget of about $2 million to do Rise of the Beast. And a lot of that went to paying ourselves, paying our cast, paying a crew, and having a crew, as well as getting like my dream camera and getting a new computer to handle all the editing and stuff like that. So that's what we did. And then we sat there and said, okay, what's a more realistic version? Like, if, we could cut out some of the catering and cut out a little bit of this, like, how far could we pare this thing down? And we ended up getting it from 2 million down to 500,000. And we did this over the span of, I think, about a month. We got the budget down to there. But it was still more money than what we were really going to be able to get. Like, we had delusions of grandeur. We actually thought that people were going to happily write us a check for $500,000 to make this movie. And we eventually realized that that was not going to be the case. Eventually, my producer drops out due to personal reasons. And I'm left there with this project on my hands. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And I remember having a discussion with my lead actor about this because we had a meeting together on our own. And we're like, hey, do you still want to make the movie? He's like, yeah. He's like, do you? I said, yeah. He goes, well, let's just do it. Well, what's the indie approach to making this thing happen? What's the indie rebel way to do it? Now, indie rebel wasn't around back then. But what is that indie rebel approach? And I said, all right, I need to have that mindset of I'm going to make the movie no matter what. Here's how we did it. I knew that I needed an HD camera that could shoot 24 frames per second. And so we bought the Canon Rebel T2i. It was brand new at the time for $800. We bought a memory card, one memory card. I had one 16 gigabyte card that could get me 48 minutes of video recorded on it. Bought 2 extra batteries, so I had a total of 3 batteries. And we said, hey, we're just going to use the kit lens. It's good enough for what we're trying to do. I then bought a set of Home Depot work lights that come on a stand. It's like a 2-pack on a stand. And I went to the dollar store and I bought a shower curtain and I got some spare PVC pipe and I made a little frame and made my own softbox that way. So my lighting cost me like $100, like super, super cheap. I then spent months on R&D, research and development, to get my computer to handle this HD footage from the Rebel T2i. Because my computer at the time was 7 or 8 years old. And when you do a jump from 2003 to 2010, video technology changed a lot during that time. And my old computer just couldn't handle the footage. And so I had to come up with a workflow to make that work. And when I talk about cameras in a later episode, I'll get into more detail on how I did that and what was involved with it. But I did find a workflow where I could shoot with this camera and still be able to edit my footage. And there were some workarounds I had to do to make that happen, but it was possible. I also spent a couple of months learning visual effects to make up for shortcomings that we would have while we shot. I knew that there were going to be things that I wanted in the film that we just physically couldn't do. And so I started teaching myself how to do all that digitally later in the computer. And so at the end of the day, the rest of my budget went to food and gas for a volunteer cast. And then I also did rent one location. I rented a conference room at a Super 8 motel, and this is where the bad guys hang out in the movie and where they, do all their stuff from. But what was funny is I also managed to scam out a regular hotel room for free for 30 minutes. So we get done shooting the conference room stuff at the end of 2 days. I go and I'm paying my check to do it. I said, "Hey, by the way, would there be any chance I can get a hotel room? Like, I only need it for 30 minutes." And the guy kind of raises an eyebrow at me. I said, "I'm not making a porno or anything. Like, here, you can take a look at my script and see for sure." He goes, "Okay, fine. 30 minutes, that's it." So he gave me a key to a room, and we went in and we shot a scene where the bad guy assassin is laying on his hotel room bed waiting for his mission. And then we also shot a bit where the main bad guy is at home and gets woken up by his team to come in because there's an issue he needs to deal with. And so one shot we had all the lights on and we lit it properly, and the other shot we turned all the lights off and lit it again to just be a nighttime shot, and it looked like he was at home in his own bedroom. Key takeaway from that is if you're not a social engineer, if you can't manipulate people into doing stuff, make sure that you have somebody on your team who's good at that. I did it all the time on Rise of the Beast. In fact, my actor told me one day, he goes, "You should get a career in public relations because you can bullshit a bullshitter." And it's true. And I don't do it on purpose. It's just something I've gotten good at doing over the years. And it's been very helpful when I'm trying to produce these films for no money. So that is how we did a $2 million movie and then shot the thing for $2,000. Big difference, right? Now, the reason I knew I could do it for $2,000 is because we had sold a bunch of DVDs of the previous movie and made $2,000. I sold 200 DVDs at 10 bucks a piece. Well, there's your 2 grand right there, right? There's the budget. And that's actually how I've funded all my movies now is I just self-produce them, self-finance them myself, and I take whatever I make off the one and I use that as the budget for the next. Coincidentally, it's just been adding a zero each time we do a new film. So I went from a $200 movie to a $2,000 movie, and my most recent one is a $20,000 movie. A lot of that is equipment that I've purchased over the past 10 years, whatever. But some of it did go to paying for cast and crew on set and stuff like that. So um, it is possible to do this. You just got to kind of start with your low hanging fruit and say, what's the easiest movie I can make right now for the budget that I have, and kind of work your way up from there. This is also why the Rodriguez list that we talked about when you're writing your story, why this is so important. Because if you're already taking stock of the things that you have access to and you're putting that into your script, you're not going to be sitting there scrambling trying to figure out how to solve those problems on set because that stuff has already been taken care of. One thing too that I've learned over the years of doing this is that you will never have your dream budget. People are not going to give you money just because you think you have a great idea for a movie. But what I have found and what I learned on Leap 2 is that the key is just to start. One foot in front of the other, step by step, paso a paso, and hope that you meet the right people along the way. People that can help you out and bring the dream, the vision to life. But at the end of the day, no one's going to share the dream at the same level and the same scope and scale as yourself. And that's totally okay. It's just something that you need to be aware of. Let's talk about points for a moment. Points are kind of the backbone of independent filmmaking. When you don't have a lot of money to pay people up front for their time and their services, you can use points. And the way points work is that it's profit sharing. They're getting a piece of the pie, a slice of the action of what the final movie does when you start making money off the movie. And so what I do is if I'm going to do points on a project, and I haven't done it on every project, but I have, like on my most recent one, I did points. You cut it in half and say, okay, 50% are for me as the writer, director, editor, camera guy, the person that's married to this thing for the next 2 years. 50% is for yourself. The other 50% you use as your bargaining chips. That becomes your currency. And you say, hey, star in my movie, I'll give you 10% profit share. I'll give you 10 points, basically. I do recommend, if you're going to go this route, get it in writing. Actors, this is especially important for you because there's a lot of slimy directors out there and producers that will try to take advantage of you. So the best way to protect yourself from that is to get the stuff in writing. I do it with a standard release form that says, I so and so consent to be filmed and have my image utilized for free, yada yada. And then I have a compensation section in there. In agreement for X amount of dollars and X amount of points, I will consent to, be in the film. So make sure that you've got that in writing, and then that just helps kind of keep everybody honest and stuff like that. I would also recommend, if you're gonna do points, if possible, try to pay your cast, even if it's just a small token amount of $100 or something. Like, pay them something, and that just shows them the goodwill that, hey, I am trying to take this seriously as a business. I'm a startup right now. I don't have the funds to do it, but I do appreciate you and I take you seriously. And so this is a way of showing, my gratitude towards that. So if you can, or let me rephrase that, if you're going to do points, try to pay people, and always, always, always have food and gas for them. So give them gas money and make sure that you've got, some food on set. If it's going to be a really, really long day, spring for a pizza. And I know there's a lot of film crews out there say, oh, no, you don't do pizza. At the independent film level, pizza is okay. I guarantee. Like, people are just going to be happy to have it. Yes, if you're doing a bigger budget film and you've got the money for craft services, then yes, you can have somebody come in and cater lunches and stuff like that. But at least do something. Okay, pizza is better than nothing at the end of the day, and you can get pizza super cheap. I've done it even on short films. Go out to Little Caesars, get a $5 pizza, maybe two $5 pizzas. It cost me $10, but hey, I've got a happy team now, helping me out and helping to bring this vision to life. Speaking of bringing the vision to life, let's talk about crowdfunding and investors. I would caution you to be careful when it comes to doing the investor route. In some states, soliciting money from people for an investment is illegal unless you have proper business structure in place and proper documents, ready to go. So keep that in mind, that you can get yourself into some serious hot water. If you're not sure, hire an attorney for an hour to meet with you and tell them what you're trying to do, and they'll be able to guide you through that process and tell you, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to pull this off if you're going to try to solicit funds. The other thing, crowdfunding. This is one that everyone says, oh yeah, but we have crowdfunding. Crowdfunding's great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you've heard me talk about it before, okay? Crowdfunding only works when you have a huge following. And by huge following, I mean like 100,000 to 1,000,000 people. I've got 22,000 followers on YouTube, like subscribers on YouTube, and I've tried to crowdfund a project before, and I made maybe $1,000 off that campaign. So I don't put a lot of merit and stock into crowdfunding. If you want to spend the time to do it, great. And if you've got a good marketing head on your shoulders, you might be able to pull it off. But chances are it's not going to work out. And now you've just wasted a month and it ends up being a little disappointing. So I like, as an independent, I'll do that ideal budget of like, oh, this is what I would love to have. Here's my practical budget of like, okay, if I cut some corners, this is what I could do. But then also be aware of, here's how much I actually have to spend, and by hook or by crook, I'm going to make this film and make it happen. Ideally, you should also not just focus on what you need to make the film, but also what you need to make money with the film. So what I mean by that is the back end. If you're going to be renting out a theater for a premiere or do any sort of public exhibition, that costs money. You're looking at between 500 and 1500 bucks in some cases to rent a theater for 2 hours. You've got streaming. Okay, streaming shouldn't cost you anything up front, but if you have to join an aggregator, you might have to pay for that. If you need to get subtitles made for your film and you don't want to spend the time to do it yourself, that's going to cost a couple $100. So there's a lot of little stuff like this that can eat you up on the back end that you didn't think about maybe necessarily at the beginning. And that's why I think a budget, you should like use that same template if you're going to do it yourself in a spreadsheet. Every single movie, but you're constantly adding to it. You're expanding upon it. You're adding based upon, hey, this worked out great for me. Wish I had this. I need to, make sure I plan for that later on. Physical media is another one. I shot Leap Rise of the Beast in 2010. I finished it in 2011. We had the premiere in May. I didn't have DVDs ready to sell until February of 2012. And it took that long just because I didn't have the funds secured up front to get DVDs made because it was a $2,000 movie. And then I spent $1,000 on DVDs. And that got me 500 2-disc sets because I had a whole behind the scenes documentary with it too. So that's why that took so long. And actually, it was through the generous support of some friends that I was actually able to come in and get the DVDs made. So just be aware that the cost of making your film isn't just making the film, it's also getting it seen by people and getting it seen by hopefully the right people that can help boost your career. So, all that said, that is kind of my approach to budgeting for a film. I do it in a spreadsheet. I like to dream, but I also then become a realist and I say, okay, here's how much I can actually spend, or here's how much it would cost me at the barest bones level to make this happen. And in some ways, your movies, you'll find you get cheaper, especially if you're doing a lot of them, because now you've already invested in the equipment and the gear, and that no longer counts towards your budget. But in some cases, maybe like, especially if you're doing short films, you'll be like, oh, hey, I need a Steadicam for this one. Well, there's an excuse to buy that and learn how that all works. And you can budget out your stuff that way too. So, thank you so much for listening. Let me know if you've got any questions or comments. My name's Christopher Temple, and you've been listening to Indie Rebel, the podcast for independent filmmakers.